What's up everybody, it's Michael and welcome to the third episode of the Honda Integra Dc2 rebuild project. So for this video I have an awful lot of work that I need to get done. I need to make all of my new plates, then get everything tacked and welded into place. Once that's all done, I need to clean all the welds back and bring all of the old paint back to bare metal. Then I'm going to be at the stage where I can prime and paint around the engine bay. And let me tell you that I'm very excited to see the outcome of what that's going to look like. So let's just get right into it. First of all, we're going to start by drilling and welding into place the new panels that we've already made on the side of the car. So let's go to work. Now before I weld the new panels into place, I'm going to put a bit of rust remedy onto the exposed metal so that it will protect it from rusting in the future. That's the rust remedy that I'm using. You allow this to dry for 15 minutes. Once that's dried, I'll then put some primer over it, and then we will put in our new panel. I will drill where the holes on the new panel is drilled just to remove a bit of primer, and then we'll tack them into place. Okay, now you can see that I've brushed on rust remedy on the driver's side. Next I'm going to hit this with a coat of primer and then we can weld on our outside panel. I've done the same on the passenger side and you can really see the difference here between the steel and the rust remedy. This is also touch dry now, so it's ready for a coat of primer too. And after I wiped down both of the new panels, I then gave them a touch of rust remedy on the inside only. Okay, now that I have the new plate held in place with the vice grips, I'm going to start MIG welding all of these plug holes. Okay, now I have the new plates welded into place. They're good and solid. Next I'm going to put some rust remedy on this again to protect it, and then when I put on the next plate, if there's a bit of overlent left on any of this metal, I'll shape it back to the shape of our outer plate. Then this is the driver's side. So I'm delighted with how they came out. Okay, now that I have both panels welded into place on the driver's and the passenger side, next we're going to move on to sorting out the issues at the bottom of the window frame. Okay, so now you can see that I have the bottom section made and welded into place. I've also covered it in rust remedy. When this dries, I'm going to spray a bit of primer over it. Then I'm going to start making the outer plate, weld that into place, and then rust remedy it and prime everything again. You also seen that I was using my TIG welder. That's because one, the metal around the windscreen frame is very light, so it's easier to burn through, and two, MIG welding, there is a lot of splatter off it, so by using the TIG welder, I'm also protecting my dash from getting burnt. Now that I have this primed, I'm going to finish putting in the new plates and then I'm going to go over to the driver's side. Okay, so if we take a look, you can see that I finally have all my new plates in and welded in place. So try and give you the best view here. You can still see that I need to tidy up a few of the welds, but I'll put on the air tool soon and sort that out then. But from what it was to how it is now, I am very happy with the outcome. And I started making the plates for this side. I've primed up underneath with rust remedy as well. So I'm going to make these plates next. And just like that, the other side is done. Again, I need to sand it all back, but I'm very happy with this. Next on the agenda, I want to finish all of the welding around the engine bay. Then after that, I want to reinstall the 2 outer plates that we took off in the beginning. Once all of the welding is finished, then I'm going to take all of this paint work back to metal. So then we can get ready for painting, which I'm really excited for. So, another busy day ahead. Okay, now that I have pretty much all the welding done around the engine bay, I can now move on to my next step, which is reinstalling both of these side panels that we took off originally. Now, before we do that, you can see that they both need a bit of TLC. So what I'm going to do is clean them up, weld in some new pieces of steel where these are gone, and we'll then tack them in place. Okay, check this out. I have everything cleaned, primed, ready to go. Okay, to reinstall these panels, we're literally going to do the reverse to what we done to take it off. First of all, we're going to line it up with our old spot welds, hold it with vice grips, tack everything, then weld all the plug welds, put a few stitches on it, job done. Let's get to work. Okay, so I can finally say that all of the welding is finally finished around the engine bay, so I am delighted. Here you can see the passenger side panel back in place and welded solid, and then we have the driver side. But as you can see, we still have a load of grinding to do, but I'll get to that. And you can see that I pulled in the wiring on the passenger side of the car to make it easier to prep for paint in that area. Now, before I grind all my welds back around the engine bay to prep them for paint, there are a couple of things that I want to do first. Number one being that I want to wipe the entire engine bay down with a cleaning agent and a cloth to remove any oil and dirt from the engine bay. And then number two, I'm experimenting with this Novol paint remover. I'm going to spray it across the entire engine bay to help remove the old paint. So let's give it a go. Okay, now that I have it all wiped down, it actually came up pretty clean for the way it is at the moment. But now we're going to go and spray it with the paint remover. Now the entire engine bay is covered, so we're going to let this sit for at least 30 minutes. You can see it starting to change colour here in different places. Again, I've never used this stuff before, so it's a bit of an experiment. While we're waiting for the paint stripper to do its thing in the engine bay, if you remember in the last video, at the back of the rear passenger arch, we found a hole. So now I'm going to get my wire wheel, clean all of this back, then I'm going to cut out the old stuff, take some measurements, make a new plate, weld it in place, and then that, my friends, should be that. Okay, now I have my new plate made up. I'm going to tack it in place and then weld it up. Now my new plate is welded into place. Now I just got to grind everything back and smooth it out. Before I started recording this morning, I quickly took off the rear lights and the rear panel. It was only a couple of 8mm and 10mm nuts, so it was easy done. But now we're ready to wire wheel all of this as well. Before I start grinding, I'm going to take all of this paint back to metal. I left the paint stripper on for 24 hours and you can see that it's doing a pretty good job. So I'm going to spend a little while cleaning all this back. Okay, now you can see that I have the inside and the outside of the engine bay finally brought back to metal. It was quite a bit of effort to do all this. It would have been a lot easier to use sandblasting rather than the way that I done it. It would have been quicker also to do it that way, but I don't have that set up. So I'm still very happy with the results that I have achieved. But the work doesn't stop there. Now we're going to move on to cleaning down everything, masking everything, and then getting ready for primer. Next, I'm going to be putting masking tape and masking paper around the windscreen frame and the door frames to protect the inside of the car. Also, don't forget to mask off the holes in the engine bay that lead into the car, like I almost forgot to do, because you need to do them from inside the car. Okay, I want to take a second to talk about what I'm actually doing here. So I have the windows and the doors both covered up, and I've covered everything in the engine bay that I need to cover. Plus, I've covered the rest of the car with a dust sheet so that I can protect the glass from overspray and the rest of the paint on the outside of the car, even though this will be getting painted at a later stage. Now you might be wondering why I haven't prepped the inside of the rear arches or any of the back of the car for paint. If you remember back in the first video, I said that the body shop was going to sandblast and treat the underside of the car, but me being me, I might have come up with an option for me to do it myself. That's going to be revealed in the next video. But for now, we're going to focus on painting the engine bay and go from there. Here are the products that I'm using: epoxy primer, white stone chip, a high build primer, NHO base coat, so it's championship white, and then here we have clear coat. And I'm also using a DeVilbiss finish line spray gun with a 1.8mm nozzle for the primers and a 1.4mm nozzle for the base coat and clear coat. And of course I'm also using a seam sealer, which I should have here tomorrow. So let's get this painted. Okay, now that I have the car completely cleaned down, the first thing that I'm going to do is spray with primer mixed with hardener and thinners. Right, now you can see that I have 2 coats of the epoxy primer put on the car, and now I'm going to apply the seam sealer and then some body filler before the next spray painting step. Right, this is the seam sealer that I'm using. It's a brushable seam sealer, and what I'm going to do is put masking tape either side of where I'm using this, and then that way when I remove the masking tape there will be straight lines and it should look okay. Now I only need to use masking tape inside the engine bay because the outside is going to be covered with stone chips, so you're not actually going to see the lines as such. Okay, that's the driver's side done. It's not the prettiest in the world, but I'm trusting the process, as I say. And now that's the passenger side done. So onto the engine bay next. Now we have everything pretty much taped up in the engine bay, so it's time to put the seam sealer on. So it's the following day from me brushing all of the seam sealer around the engine bay. It's now gone off. And to be honest with you, I know it mightn't be to everybody's taste, but I'm quite happy with the results. Once this is all painted the same colour, I think it's going to look good. I've now started taping off on either side of the engine bay for the stone chip, so time to get that sprayed. Okay, so I've given it 2 coats of stone chip on either side and it's looking unreal. Next, I'm going to remove the masking tape and then I'm going to give it a coat of filler primer around the inside of the engine bay. Okay guys, now I've given the engine bay 3 coats of the high build primer and I've let it set for 24 hours. So it's ready for the next stage. Let's take a closer look at it. Okay, to look at it you can see that it's had a very even 3 coats. To touch it, it feels rough. So we have to sand all this before I put the base coat on next. If I was to critic myself on anything, it would be the seam sealer. I would have probably tried to do it a little bit tidier and it should look okay. But all in all, I'm still very happy with the outcome so far. Okay, so for the sanding, I'm going to start with 400 grit, then I'm going to move on to 600 grit and then finish it with 800 grit. So again, this is trial and error for me, so we'll see what the outcome is when it's finished. Let's get to work. Side note, I'm also dry sanding all of the engine bay. This is because, from my understanding, if you wet sand primer, the water will seep through the primer and then the steel will begin to rust, which is definitely not what we want. So now back to work. Next up is the 600. And now the 800. Okay, now that I have the engine bay completely sanded down with the 3 different grades of sandpaper, it's feeling nice and smooth, but it's now covered in a lot of sanding dust. So to clean that up, I'm going to use tack cloths. You use these prior to painting and they will lift any dirt or dust that's left behind from the sanding. So once that's done, we're ready to apply the base coat. Okay, that's the engine bay completely cleaned up and ready for the base coat, and those tack cloths done a class job. They removed every bit of dust and grit that was left behind after sanding. Right, so the base coat that I'm using is a water-based paint and it's championship white. So I'm going to mix it up, put it in the gun and spray my first base coat, which is going to be a light coat, about 70% coverage, and we'll go from there. Okay, paint is in the gun and I'm also using a 1.4mm nozzle. So it's been about 15 or 20 minutes since I sprayed the first coat, and you can see that it's looking a kind of matte colour. So that tells me I'm ready to go ahead and spray the second pass. I'm going to spray a wetter coat to give it a better coverage. So let's get the second coat painted. So that's after 2 coats. Looking good. The paint is starting to cover the primer pretty good. So again, I'm going to let that sit now for another 15-20 minutes. When it's gone kind of matty looking again, I will give it a third coat and then we'll see. Okay, so I've got 3 coats on the engine bay now and I'm really happy with it so far, but I feel like one more coat will just be the trick that I need to finish it. So now I'm going to give it that coat, I'm going to let it set for the night, and then tomorrow we're going to give it the clear coat. Okay, now you can see my 4th and final coat of base coat applied to the engine bay, and I'm actually really happy with the outcome of this. It's the first time I've painted anything like this, so yeah, really happy. Okay, it's the next day. The base coat has been left to set overnight. It's looking really good, it's feeling very smooth, and now I'm ready to apply 2 coats of the clear. Before I apply the clear, I'm going to wipe it all down with a tack cloth, and the clear that I'm using is KBS Clear Diamond Finish. Never used it before, looking forward to seeing the outcome of this. Okay guys, so I've now actually given this 3 coats. To say that I am only happy with what I've achieved from where it was to where it is now would be a complete understatement. I really hope you enjoyed this video. It did take a while longer to record, but that's because we had so much work to do and I just wanted to deliver on it. If you enjoyed it, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and I'll catch you in the next one. See ya.